This past Thursday, my husband and I participated in a rite of passage for middle school parents, the winter band concert. This is a tradition I remember most clearly from the other side when I was a middle schooler, full of nerves, peering out into the audience to catch a glimpse of my parents, wherever they were sitting. But this week was my first time attending one of these as a parent. Our 7th grader attends a small public middle school on the Upper West Side where every child participates in marching band, which was the main feature of the evening. But there were also performances from the school's singing group and dance group. As is expected, there were 0 earth-shattering performances. But you'd never know that from the enthusiasm of the applause. I was especially struck when a kiddo messed up during the vocal group's time on stage. She missed a note and collapsed into embarrassed giggles while her peers valiantly kept up the background vocals. Almost immediately, shouts of encouragement rose up from the gathered parents. "You've got this, girl. Keep going." And such determined applause that once the young performer was back on track, the teacher had to shush the crowd, who were now hurting rather than helping in terms of noise ratio. I loved this so much. Most of the children at my daughter's school are Black and brown kids, many of whom are immigrants or children of immigrants. It felt wonderful to see them celebrated and cherished. Not each child only by their own parents, but all of us, celebrating all of them. I was deeply aware, sitting there, that the world outside the doors of school, outside the reach of protective parents and determined teachers, may not automatically cherish all of these kids. But it felt like in that moment, every child was appropriately valued by every adult in the room, loved and seen and celebrated for all the courage and hope that it takes to be a kid, and to be a kid at a winter band concert, especially. Every parent wants their children to be seen for who they are: amazing, brilliant, loved. It's not only parents of children of color who face the fear that the world will not love their children. Lots of parents carry anxiety that a child will be punished instead of valued for the things that make them uniquely who they are. Skin color, gender identity, neurodiversity, mental illness or wellness, physical ability. Our world has such narrow definitions for what sort of human life matters. And yet, when we see our children, we see light, beauty, perfection. We see their sacred value. This morning's gospel is many things. It is an odd tale of a wedding in a place that no one cared about, with people who have no names. It's an upside-down, unnecessary gift, the best wine produced at the end of the party. And it is a mother who knows the world will not love her brilliant child, pushing him to reveal who he is. The Gospel of John is perhaps the most refined and poetic telling of Jesus' life in our Bible. Every word is placed with care, and every story has a purpose. In the Gospel of John, there isn't a traditional birth story for Jesus of Nazareth. Instead, we are given a cosmic poem about the beginning of the universe. And for the most part, John's Gospel gives us a cosmic Jesus. Jesus in this Gospel is not tempted in the wilderness, and he doesn't pray in the garden for God to take this cup from me, the way he does in all 3 of the other Gospels. Jesus often reassures his followers that he knows everything, and when he prays or teaches, it is for their sake, not for his. And Jesus does not do miracles in the Gospel of John. Instead, when Jesus uses his power, this gospel calls these acts signs. Scholars debate whether there are 7 or 8 signs in the Gospel of John and exactly which ones they are, but no one debates that this is the first one. Jesus turning water into wine at the wedding feast in Cana. It says it right there in the text. Signs, acts that point beyond themselves to something else, something true, something hard to find without a sign. Jesus did this, the first of his signs, and the result was that his glory was revealed, and his disciples believed in him. I love that here in this very dignified and poetic gospel, a gospel that portrays for us a Jesus who appears from the cosmos and is always keeping his end in mind, that this is also the only place where we find Jesus being successfully bossed around by his mother. Jesus' mother is aware, I think, that this child she bore into the world is headed for revolution and suffering and pain. She knows that he is on a path to Jerusalem and notoriety and the cross. She knows this if for no other reason than that he cannot stop talking about it. That's what Jesus is referring to when he says, "My hour has not yet come." So his mother prods him to begin somewhere different. At a wedding in a nowhere town, where the pressing issue is not life or death, just the ability to keep on drinking. She asks Jesus to begin with extravagance and grace. She stands, a member of an oppressed ethnic minority, under the heel of a cold and powerful empire. A woman who has, at least according to other gospel accounts, been through fear and trauma and the risk of death in order to protect her child from harm. She stands and asks her son to notice that people are out of wine. She asks him to reveal God's love first at a feast, to show himself first in an extravagant and graceful gift. She knows that this is what Jesus is, an extravagant sign of God's overwhelming grace and love for human beings. No one knew this like his mother did. I have had similar revelations in a less cosmic way, perhaps about my children. Moments when I look at them and think, God must love me so much that I get to know this person. Jesus' mother knew this to be true of her child, not only for herself, but for the whole world. And she also likely suspected that most of the signs that would point to this truth would involve experiences of pain and vulnerability and death. This is the only time in this gospel when somebody knows something Jesus does not. He resists it at first. "Woman," he says, "my hour has not yet come." But Mama calls it. "Living comes before dying," she says, and leaves him to it. Live first. Live and revel and delight and cherish, and then pour yourself out for this world. And he does. I have avoided saying the name of Jesus' mother this morning, because while she shows up twice in John, she is never given a name in this gospel. Johannine scholar Sandra Schneiders is fond of noting that this is a literary device the author of this gospel uses to invite the reader to imagine ourselves as the unnamed person. So I've been puzzling over this all week. What might it mean in the midst of all that is going on in this world for me to nudge God for more wine? What might it mean for me to call for signs of God's extravagant grace and love? Not because of urgent need to heal or save or sacrifice, but simply for the sake of love and connection and life itself. It feels impossible, honestly, especially now. Now, when our government is preparing for mass deportations, which will terrorize many people, including the families of children who go to school with my child. Especially now when it feels even less possible to protect my children from a world that doesn't see their essential value. Now when there is so much that needs fixing and healing and saving and doing, how can I ask God for extravagant things when there are so many necessary things missing? And yet, Jesus' mother faced all this. It must have also felt impossible for her. Somehow, she was able to imagine a world where God's extravagant love and grace pours out without needing an earth-shaking reason. A world where delight is found in new beginnings and simple feasts. She asks her son to begin to reveal himself with this sign. Even as Jesus was focused on the hour of his death, his mother took his chin in her hand and said to her boy, "First, beloved, life." Church, we have a lot of work to do in the weeks, months, and years ahead. We will need to pour ourselves out for this world, to join with those who suffer, to risk ourselves to protect the vulnerable. We will need to stand with people who are different than us for the sake of the gospel. Tomorrow, our country inaugurates a president and remembers Dr. King, who died for God's dream. Today, I want us to remember where Jesus began. Jesus, under the sage advice of his mother, began with joy and grace. This is where our new world must also begin, with joy poured out on every human and all the world. This Epiphany season, friends, we are invited to imagine a God whose grace doesn't need a reason to flow. A world where the waters of baptism flow into the wine of our feast without needing a broken body in between. That's not our world, not the one we've got right now. But it is God's world. It is what we must imagine. It is what we glimpse most clearly in moments of grace and celebration and joy. We are invited to imagine a world where all humans are encountered first as beloved, brilliant children of God. So this coming week, if you have an opportunity to give or receive grace, take it. And if you have an opportunity to see and love one of God's children whom our world rejects, do it. That child of God might be you, or it might be someone else. Jesus' ministry began with celebration in the midst of oppression, with rebellious and joyful beginnings, in a place and a time where his people felt like they were closer to the end. This Epiphany, we are also invited to feast on love and grace. And every Sunday when we come to this table, we can remember that regardless of the end, this extravagant celebration, this radical love, this is where we begin.